My name is Gerald Harmon, and I was 63 years old the afternoon my parents sat across from me at a kitchen table. I had refinished with my own hands and told me the house belonged to my brother now. The maple tree in the backyard of that house on Sycamore Hill Road was the one I had climbed as a boy. The wooden porch steps still had the dent from the summer. I dropped a concrete planter, trying to surprise my mother for her birthday. I knew that house the way you know a place that raised you, by its sounds at night, by the way the third stair creaked, by the particular smell of the basement after rain. My brother Dennis did not know what I had locked away in a filing cabinet 20 years earlier. None of them did. Welcome back to Channel, where quiet patience always outlasts loud cruelty. If you've ever been the person who carried a family on your back while someone else got the credit, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. My full name is Gerald Raymond Harmon. I was 63 years old when the conversation on Sycamore Hill Road happened, and I had lived in Millbrook, Ohio most of my life. I had worked for 31 years as a structural engineer at a mid-sized firm called Devereaux and Associates on Commerce Street, the kind of place where you knew the receptionist's children by name and the coffee machine had been broken since 2009. I retired early at 61 after Margaret died. Margaret Louise Harmon, my wife of 34 years, passed on a Tuesday morning in February from a pulmonary embolism that came without warning and left without giving me a chance to say anything that mattered. After that, I kept going to the office for about 3 weeks before my supervisor, a decent man named Paul Frisch, sat me down at 4:15 on a Thursday afternoon and told me gently that I was allowed to stop. So I stopped. The house on Sycamore Hill Road was my parents' house, the one my father, Raymond Harmon Sr., had bought in 1971 for $32,000. It sat on a quarter acre at the end of a cul-de-sac, a cream-colored colonial with dark green shutters, and a detached garage that my father had insulated himself over 2 weekends in October of 1983. I remembered handing him the staple gun. I was 11 years old. My brother Dennis was 4 years younger than me. He had always been the easier one, easier with people, easier to be around, quicker to laugh. Our parents never tried to hide that he was the one they relaxed around. When Dennis walked into a room, my mother smiled first. When I walked in, she remembered something she needed to ask me about. I noticed it young. I filed it away young. That is what you do when you are a certain kind of child. Dennis had married twice. His first wife, Carol, lasted 7 years and left quietly. His second wife, Pauline, was a woman who wore her opinions like jewelry, loudly and at all times. She had come into the family in 2009, and by 2011, she was already making seating arrangements at holiday dinners that did not include a chair for Margaret and me unless someone physically placed one at the table. I placed one at the table 3 Thanksgivings in a row before Margaret said we should just arrive with our own folding chairs and make it a tradition. She was joking. We laughed about it in the car on the way home. I still think about that sometimes. The situation with the house had begun in 2003. My father had a mild stroke in January of that year. Not debilitating, but frightening enough that he and my mother began talking seriously about what they wanted to happen with their affairs. My father called me, not Dennis. That was the first thing. He called me at 7:22 in the evening on a Wednesday in late January and asked me to come over the following Saturday morning. He said he needed to talk to someone who understood paperwork. I came on Saturday. My mother made coffee and set out a plate of her walnut cookies, the ones she only made when something serious was happening. My father had a manila folder on the table in front of him. I want this house to stay in the family, he said. I want it done right. What are you thinking? I said, I'm thinking I don't want it going through probate, he said. I want it protected. I want to know it's handled. He slid the folder across to me. Inside was a deed to the property at 14 Sycamore Hill Road, Millbrook, Ohio. I looked at it for a long moment. The paper was heavy. The print was small. The notary seal in the bottom corner had gone slightly dry around the edges. I'd like you to hold on to it, my father said. Not own it. Hold it. Keep it somewhere safe, so your mother and I don't have to worry about it. I looked at him. You want me to be the custodian. Something like that, he said. You're the one I trust with things that need to be kept. I took the deed home that Saturday. I placed it in the fireproof filing cabinet I kept in my home office on Birchwood Lane. The gray metal one with the key I wore on my regular keychain. It sat in a manila folder labeled simply Sycamore behind my own mortgage documents and Margaret's insurance paperwork. For 20 years, that deed sat there. In those 20 years, I paid my parent property taxes every year from 2004 onward, $11,400 in total across the years, paid in 2 installments each spring and fall, never missed, never mentioned. I drove my mother to her cardiologist appointments every month for 4 years after her own heart scare in 2015, sitting in the waiting room of the offices of Dr. Constance Merrifield on Porter Avenue while the nurse called her name and the television in the corner played the same 3 news stories on a loop. I hired contractors to replace the roof of the Sycamore Hill house in 2017 when my father told me there was a leak above the master bedroom. $22,000, which I paid in full, and which I recorded in a notebook I kept in the same filing cabinet as a deed. I mowed that lawn every summer for 6 years after my father's hip surgery in 2016 made it hard for him to push the mower up the slight grade toward the back fence. I never asked for anything back. That is not a complaint. That is just what it was. The first time Pauline made it clear she was thinking about the house was Easter of 2019. Margaret had been gone for 2 years by then. Dennis and Pauline had come for dinner, and my mother had made her glazed ham, and the table had the good plates on it. After dinner, while my father was dozing in his recliner and my mother was in the kitchen, Pauline sat down beside me on the sofa and tilted her head the way she did when she was about to say something she had rehearsed. Dennis and I had been talking, she said, about the future, about what makes sense practically. What kind of practically? I said, this house is big, she said. Your parents are getting older. It would make more sense for someone to be closer. Dennis, and I could really do a lot with a property like this. Something in my chest went very still. I kept my face neutral and looked at the painting above the fireplace, a watercolor of a covered bridge my mother had bought at a craft fair in 1994. That's a conversation for my parents to have, I said. Of course, Pauline said and smiled. Of course it is. My father died on March 14th, 2021, at 6:47 in the morning. He went quietly in his own bed, the way he would have wanted. I was the one who called the funeral home. I was the one who called the attorney. I was the one who sat with my mother in the kitchen at 8:30 that morning while Dennis and Pauline were still driving up from Columbus. The attorney handling my father's estate was a man named Douglas Vellum, a probate and estate lawyer with an office on Harrison Street. My father had updated his will in 2019, and Douglas Vellum had drawn up the documents. I met with him on March 22nd, 2021, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He was a careful man, precise, the kind who paused before he spoke. The will distributes the personal property and accounts equally, Douglas said. The house itself is not addressed in the will, because it was not in your father's estate at the time of its updating. The deed had been transferred. I sat with that. I looked at the surface of his desk, which was clean except for a legal pad and a cup of pens. I understand, I said. Your parents made certain arrangements, Douglas said carefully, that I am not fully privy to. I thanked him, shook his hand, and drove home. The dinner happened on a Saturday in April of 2021, 5 weeks after my father's funeral. My mother had asked us both to come, Dennis and Pauline from Columbus, me from Birchwood Lane. She said she wanted to talk about the house. She said it the way she said most things to me, which was matter-of-factly, without softness, the way you tell someone about a scheduling change. The kitchen smelled of pot roast and the particular lemony cleaning product my mother had used on her counters for 40 years. The overhead light was on too bright, the way it always was in that kitchen, and the windows above the sink were dark because it was already past 6:30 by the time we all sat down. There was a basket of dinner rolls in the center of the table that nobody touched. My mother sat at the head. Dennis sat to her left with Pauline beside him. I sat across. My mother did not wait for dessert. I've made a decision about the house, she said. I want Dennis to have it. I said nothing. I picked up my water glass and set it back down. I think it's the right thing, she said. He has a family. He has Pauline. They have space needs. Of course, I said. It's your house to give. Pauline reached across the table and touched my mother's hand. We're going to take such good care of it, Eleanor. We really are. Dennis looked at me. He did not look guilty, exactly. He looked the way he always looked. Easy, relaxed, slightly amused. You understand, Jerry, he said. It just makes sense. I understand, I said. That was the end of it, as far as they were concerned. But over the following 2 months, the conversation did not stay where they had left it. It grew. It changed shape. It started coming to me from different angles. The second time was a phone call from Pauline in late April. I was sitting at my desk at home at 9:18 in the morning, sorting through some bills, when my phone rang. Gerald, she said, we've been thinking about the transition, the legal side. Dennis and I would like to move fairly quickly since Eleanor is getting older and we like everything settled. What kind of timeline are you thinking? I said, honestly, as soon as possible, she said. We were hoping you could help facilitate, since you've always been the one who handles the family paperwork. Something in my throat tightened. I let a moment pass before I answered. I'll need to look at some things, I said. I'll be in touch. She thanked me in particular bright voice she used when she thought she had gotten what she wanted. The third time was at my mother's house on a Sunday in May. Dennis and Pauline had driven up, and I had come for lunch. The wisteria along the back fence was blooming, heavy and purple, the scent of it coming to the screen door in waves. The wooden table in the kitchen had 3 of its original chairs and 1 replacement that had never quite matched. Dennis brought a folder to the lunch table. We had an attorney draft a transfer document, he said. Just a quick claim deed. Simple. We just need Mom to sign it and a notary to witness. My mother looked at the folder. Then she looked at me. Jerry, she said, is there anything I need to know? I looked at the folder. I looked at my mother. My hands were still on the table in front of me. Not right now, I said. I'd like to look at it first. Pauline's expression did not change, but something around her eyes went flat. It's very straightforward, she said. There's really nothing complicated. I'm sure, I said. I'd still like to look at it. There was a pause. The screen door moved slightly in a small wind from outside. This is a family matter, Dennis said. Between Mom and us. I'm not sure why it needs to go through you. I said nothing. I folded my hands. I let that settle in the room. The 4th exchange came 3 days later, on a Wednesday morning, when Dennis called me directly. I was in my car at 8:45 a.m., parked outside the hardware store on Elm Street, having just bought a new blade for the lawnmower I still used on my mother's lawn. I need to know where you stand on this, Dennis said. Pauline feels like you're creating obstacles. I'm not creating anything, I said. Then why are you dragging your feet? I'm being careful, I said. That's different. Careful for what? It's Mom's house. She wants me to have it. That's the end of the story. My stomach dropped quietly. I was looking at the bag from the hardware store on the passenger seat. Maybe, I said. What does that mean? He said. It means I'll be in touch, I said. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. You've always done this, he said. Made yourself the important one, the one who has to be consulted. Even now, Jerry, even now. I said nothing. I started the car. Over the next 3 weeks, the pressure on my mother increased in ways I only learned about later. Pauline began calling her every other day. She brought over a notary, a woman named Sheila Vance, who had an office on the 2nd floor of the building on Franklin Street. On a Tuesday afternoon, without telling me, my mother, to her credit, said she was not ready to sign anything yet. That Tuesday afternoon was May 18th. I know the date because my mother called me that evening at 7:04 and told me what had happened. Her voice sounded tired in a particular way, the way it sounded when something had exhausted her, without her being able to name exactly what it was. They came with a woman and some papers. My mother said, I told them I wanted to wait. You were right to wait, I said. Gerald, she said, and she paused. Your father trusted you with things. He always trusted you with things. I know, I said. Is there anything I should know? She said again. The same question she had asked at the lunch table. Something in me went very quiet. Not cold, not still, quiet, like the moment before a gear catches. "Yes," I said, "but not yet." The fifth time was at the kitchen table again, late May. Pauline had escalated to something she had clearly planned. She waited until my mother had gone to use the bathroom before she leaned across the table toward me. "I want to be clear with you," she said, her voice low and very even. "This family belongs to Dennis now. Your father made his choice. Eleanor has made hers. You are the extra one here, Gerald. You have always been the extra one. The sooner you accept that and step aside, the better this goes for everyone." I looked at her. My chest went absolutely still. I did not answer her. I looked at the watercolor above the fireplace, the covered bridge, the craft fair 1994, and I said nothing at all. My mother came back from the bathroom. The conversation moved on. Pauline passed the sugar bowl and smiled. I drove home at 9:30 that night. The streets were wet. The radio was off. The second named professional I contacted was a real estate attorney named Martin Chezik, who had an office on the fourth floor of the Devereaux Building on Central Avenue. I had been referred to him by Douglas Vellum. I called Martin Chezik's office on the morning of May 20th and made an appointment for May 26th at 10 a.m. I brought the deed. I sat in my home office on the morning of May 26th at 7:14 a.m. before driving to Martin Chezik's office, and I did not move for a long time. The filing cabinet was open in front of me. The manila folder labeled Sycamore was on the desk. The deed was inside it. The original deed to 14, Sycamore Hill Road, signed by my father in 2003, transferred to me as custodial holder under a trust arrangement that Douglas Vellum had explained to me in legal terms I had since had time to fully absorb. The paper was still heavy. The notary seal had not dried further. It looked exactly as it had looked the Saturday my father slid it across the kitchen table to me. I thought about that Saturday a great deal that morning. I thought about the staple gun, the insulated garage, October 1983. I thought about my father's voice on the phone, not Dennis's number, mine. I had always understood, on some level, why he called me, not because he favored me. He didn't, not exactly. He called me because he trusted me with things that needed to be kept. That was a distinction. It had always been the distinction. I thought about Margaret. She would have known exactly what to do with this moment. She had a gift for clarity that I had spent 34 years borrowing. I thought about the folding chairs she had joked about on the way home from Thanksgiving. I thought about the way she laughed, low and genuine, from somewhere real. I thought about the property taxes, $11,400 over the years, recorded in a notebook that was also in this filing cabinet, page by page, in my own handwriting. I thought about the roof, the $20,000 I had paid to a contractor named Pizza Bella from Sabella Roofing on Industrial Way, who had filed a permit with the county on August 4th, 2017. I thought about the years of mowing, the Tuesday drives to Dr. Constance Merrifield's office on Porter Avenue, the Saturday afternoons when I sat with my father while Dennis was in Columbus with Pauline, doing whatever they did with their weekends. I thought about Pauline's voice at the kitchen table. The extra one here, Gerald. Something in me settled. Not coldness, not resolve in the dramatic sense. Just settled, like water finding its level. I was not going to allow them to transfer a house they did not legally own. That was not complicated. That was arithmetic. The question I had been sitting with for the past month was not whether to act. It was whether I wanted to do it in a way that preserved any relationship with my mother afterward. That was the harder question. My mother was 81 years old. She had made a choice that favored Dennis. She had always made choices that favored Dennis. I did not think she was a cruel woman. I thought she was a woman who had a preference she had never examined closely enough to see what it cost. I had paid what it cost. For decades, without saying so. At 7:52 a.m., I stood up, put the deed in my inside jacket pocket, locked the filing cabinet, and drove to Central Avenue. I continued to mow my mother's lawn that spring. I drove her to her cardiologist appointment on June 3rd and sat in the waiting room with the television and the news stories on a loop. I brought her groceries on a Tuesday afternoon in early June and stacked them in the pantry in the order she liked. I did not tell her what I had put in motion. I did not need to. Not yet. The first concrete preparation step had already been taken. I had called Martin Chezik. I was going to his office with the deed. Everything after that would follow its own logic. Dennis and Pauline had a timeline in their heads. I could feel it in every conversation through June. Pauline called my mother every second day. Dennis drove up from Columbus on the first Saturday of June and brought a contractor to walk through the house, a man who measured rooms and made notes on a tablet and spoke about potential rental income with the easy confidence of someone who already owned the thing he was assessing. My mother told me about this on the phone that evening at 8:19. She did not seem troubled by it. She seemed tired. "They're very organized," my mother said. "They are," I said. "Dennis says it will be simple." She said, "That the transfer could be done in a day." "That depends," I said. "On what?" she said. "On what paperwork exists," I said. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause my mother used when she was deciding whether to ask a follow-up question. She did not ask one. Dennis called me on June 8th at 11:30 in the morning. I was in my backyard on Birchwood Lane, drinking coffee, watching a pair of starlings argue over something in the grass near the fence. "We're moving forward," he said. "We've got a notary scheduled for June 22nd. Mom has agreed. I'm letting you know as a courtesy." "I appreciate that," I said. "I don't need your approval, Gerald," he said. "I want to be very direct about that. This is not something you're part of." "I hear you," I said. "Then we're clear?" I said nothing. I watched the starlings. One of them flew off. The other stayed. "Gerald," he said, "are we clear?" "I'll see you on the 22nd, I said. He took that as agreement. I could hear it in the way his voice relaxed. "Good," he said. "Good. Let's just get this done." He hung up. Something in my chest moved, not tightening, not dropping. Something different. A kind of quieting, like a held note resolving. Pauline appeared at my mother's house 2 more times before the 22nd. I knew because my mother mentioned both visits in our weekly calls. The second time, Pauline had brought paint chips. She had held them up against the walls of the kitchen and the living room and talked about what she would change. My mother had said the green was nice. I had already been back to Martin Chezik's office twice by that point. The first return visit was on June 4th at 2:30 p.m. Martin Chezik was a compact, methodical man with reading glasses he kept on a chain around his neck. He had reviewed the 2003 deed thoroughly and had asked me to bring any supporting documentation. The tax payment records, the contractor permits, the maintenance history. I had brought the notebook from my filing cabinet. 31 pages of entries in my own handwriting, and the county tax receipts which I filed every year in a manila envelope behind the deed. Martin Chezik turned the pages of the notebook slowly. He did not rush. "This is thorough," he said. "I kept records of everything," I said. "I can see that," he said. He set the notebook down and looked at me over his glasses. "Gerald, I want to make sure you understand the full picture before we go further. What your father established in 2003 was not a simple custodial arrangement. The transfer of that deed was legally complete. You are not holding this for the estate. You own it." My breath caught. I had understood this intellectually since my first meeting with Douglas Vellum, but hearing it said directly, plainly, by a man who had reviewed every document, something shifted. "What does that mean for the June 22nd notarization?" I said, "It means," Martin said, "that the quitclaim deed your brother is planning to execute cannot convey clear title. Your mother cannot sign over what she does not own. If they proceed, they will be attempting to transfer a property to which they hold no legal interest." I sat with that for a moment. "What would you recommend?" I said, "I would recommend," he said, "that we file a notice of interest with the county recorder's office before June 22nd. Something formal. Something that appears in the public record." "Do that," I said. On June 14th, 2021, at 9:17 a.m., Martin Chezik filed a notice of interest in the property at 14 Sycamore Hill Road with the Millbrook County Recorder's Office. The filing was public record by end of business that day. The document cited the original 2003 deed transfer and listed Gerald Raymond Harmon as the deed holder of record. Dennis did not know. Pauline did not know. My mother did not know. The notary was still scheduled for June 22nd. I let it stay that way. The morning of June 22nd was overcast, the sky a flat white. The kitchen at 14, Sycamore Hill Road, smelled of coffee and the walnut cookies my mother made when something serious was happening. There were 4 chairs at the table this time. My mother sat at her end. Dennis sat to her left. Pauline sat beside Dennis with a folder in front of her. I sat across. The notary arrived at 10 a.m. Her name was Sheila Vance. She had her bag and her stamp, and she sat at the corner of the table with professional composure of someone who had witnessed hundreds of signatures. Pauline opened the folder. Inside was a quitclaim deed Dennis's attorney had drafted, transferring property at 14, Sycamore Hill Road, from Eleanor Harmon to Dennis and Pauline Harmon jointly. My mother reached for the pen. I reached into my inside jacket pocket. I placed the original deed on the table in front of Sheila Vance. I placed it flat, carefully, directly in front of her. I said nothing. Sheila Vance looked at the document. She picked it up. She read the first section. Then she read it again. The room was quiet. "This is the deed of record for this property," Sheila said. Her voice was even, professional. "This property was transferred out of your father's name in 2003. It's currently held by," she looked at the name, "Gerald Raymond Harmon." My mother's hand went still on the table. The pen was still between her fingers. Dennis looked at the deed. Then he looked at me. His face did not shift immediately. It went through something slower than that. Like a calculation, he was running in real time and not liking the result of. "That's not right," he said. "It's the document of record," Sheila said. "I'd need to confer with the county recorder, but if this is valid, it's been filed with the county recorder since June 14th, I said. "The filing number is on the back." Sheila turned the document over. She read the filing number. She wrote something in her own notebook. Dennis stood up. His chair moved back against the floor with a flat sound. "You've had this for 20 years, he said. His voice was low and very controlled. "Dad gave it to me," I said. "He asked me to keep it somewhere safe." "He didn't give it to you," Dennis said. "He trusted you with it." "Those are the same thing," I said. "Legally." Pauline's hands were flat on the table in front of her. Her face had gone very still. Not pale exactly, but stripped of its usual arrangement. My mother had not moved. The pen was still in her hand. She was looking at the deed on the table between us, and something was happening behind her eyes that I had no name for. "Mom," Dennis said. He turned to her. "Did you know about this?" "No," she said quietly. The word was very small. I looked at my mother. "He called me," I said. "He called me on a Wednesday in January of 2003, a week after his stroke. He said he needed someone who understood paperwork. He said he didn't want it going through probate. He asked me to keep it somewhere safe." I paused. I kept it somewhere safe. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Sheila Vance was writing carefully in her notebook. She did not look up. Dennis turned back to me. "What are you going to do with it?" he said. "Nothing today," I said. I folded my hands. I looked at the watercolor above the fireplace one more time. Then I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair, thanked Sheila Vance for her time, kissed my mother on the top of her head, and walked out to the front door. The porch step still had the dent from the concrete planter. In the weeks that followed June 22nd, several things happened in a specific order. On June 25th, 3 days after the meeting, my mother called me at 8:40 in the morning. She asked me to come over. I did. We sat at the kitchen table. Just the two of us, no folder, no notary, and she asked me to explain the whole thing from the beginning. I did. I explained the phone call in 2003, the Saturday visit, the deed, the filing cabinet, the tax records, the roof, the Tuesday drives to Dr. Merrifield's office. I showed her the notebook. She turned the pages for a long time without saying anything. When she finished, she set the notebook down. She looked at the table. "He didn't tell me," she said, "about the deed." "No," I said. "I don't think he did." "He trusted you," she said. "He trusted me with things that needed to be kept." I said, "That was always a distinction." She was quiet for a while after that. The refrigerator hummed. The kitchen smelled of the lemony cleaner. On July 9th, Martin Chesak and I met with my mother and her own attorney, a woman named Patricia Holt, an estate and property lawyer with an office on Maple Street, and we discussed the formal path forward. The outcome, reached by mutual agreement, was a life estate arrangement. The property at 14 Sycamore Hill Road was formally recognized as held in my name. My mother retained full rights to live there for the remainder of her life, with all expenses, maintenance, and taxes handled by me as they had been handled for the previous 2 decades. Upon her death, the property would pass to both Dennis and me equally. Dennis did not attend the July 9th meeting. He sent a brief email through his attorney on July 12th acknowledging the arrangement. Pauline did not contact me after June 22nd. I mowed my mother's lawn on a Saturday in late July, the same way I had mowed it every summer since my father's hip surgery. The grass was thick from the recent rain. The wisteria along the back fence had finished blooming and gone green. I pushed the mower up the slight grade toward the back fence and thought about my father measuring the insulation in this garage 40 years ago in October. There's a kind of accounting that families do informally, the kind that happens in kitchens over walnut cookies and holiday dinners, that runs entirely on assumptions about who is which kind of person. That accounting is rarely written down. It is rarely examined. It just accumulates. My father was a man who wrote things down. He was a man who called the one he trusted, not the one he preferred. I think, in his quiet way, he understood that those were different categories, and that being the second one is easier, and being the first one is more important. Gerald Raymond Harmon, 63 years old, and still the one his father called. I drove home from my mother's house on a Saturday evening in late July with the windows down and the radio off. The air smelled of cut grass and the first suggestion of coming rain. The road home was the same road it had always been, and I took the same turns I had always taken. The things at last I have found are the ones that get written down and kept somewhere safe. What would you have done? Sitting in that room on June 22nd, watching your brother reach for the pen, with the deed still in your jacket pocket. Drop a comment and let me know. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.